I've failed all my life, and that is why I'm successful. I have not failed. I have found 10,000 ways that will not work. The greatest failures in life are those that did not realize how close they were to realizing success before they gave up. These are famous quotes by two individuals, Michael Jordan as well as Thomas A. Edison, successful individuals who've all made an impact in society in their various disciplines. If these individuals can appreciate that success is part of the journey, we too should also appreciate that important fact. Hi everyone, in today's video we'll be talking about the tools and tricks and tips in order to be able to deal with failure as a student. Now what you need to understand is that failure is part of the process. Whether you're experiencing for the first time or numerous times failure in a test, exam, or even the year, you need to be in a position to be able to cope with that failure so that you can become a better student and ultimately rise to the occasion. Now there are 5 steps that we'll cover today that are essential tools in order to assist you in order to cope with failure. The first one is to be able to understand the importance of the grieving process. This is a step that is often underlooked or not really taken as an important step when individuals are dealing with failure. What you must understand that failure results in emotions within us. When you don't achieve an expected outcome, you are likely to feel angry, sad, depressed, or resentful, or even feel like you are useless. These are natural emotions that you are bound to feel. You need to allow yourself to feel these emotions. The failure to embrace these emotions as and when they occur, when failure is upon you, will ultimately hinder your progress in the long run. It's very important, therefore, that you express these emotions to the fullest extent whilst they are there. Now, how long should this grieving process ideally last? The more significant the failure, the more likely that the grieving process will be longer. For example, if you've experienced failure in a test, it may be appropriate that you take a day or two in order to be able to crystallize the fact that you have failed so that you are able to get the emotions in the right frame of mind so that you are able to be in a position to deal with that failure. If you failed an exam or a year, it may be that you need a longer period of time than a couple of days. Regardless of with the significance though, it's very important that you allow yourself to grieve. The second process or the second step that is important within you being able to cope with failure is understanding what caused it. Now, in understanding and doing a deep dive of what caused the failure, there are usually 2 reflection points that are necessary. There is what we call the internal reflection and the external reflection. When performing the internal reflection, you are assessing for yourself what caused you or what the factors that caused you to fail ultimately are. This is when you look at a memorandum or Marcus comments and you compare them to the script that you've written. When you perform this analysis, you may identify several issues that have caused you to not do well in that particular assessment. Examples of issues that may have resulted in you not being successful could be you have been unable to manage time in that test and exam owing to pressures that were inherent in that test. It could be that you've made silly mistakes in that test and exam, or you could have incorrectly applied principles that you thought you knew, or lastly, it could happen that you didn't end up appreciating or studying a specific learning area or topic prior to you entering that exam room, and as a result you ultimately failed to appreciate that and therefore failed the test and exam. Regardless of what caused the outcome, the internal analysis allows you to be more engaged so that you can see for yourself what the issues are that you need to be able to address in order to cope with that failure. Now, doing an internal reflection is a good starting point. However, it should not be the only thing you do. It's important that you also accompany this reflection by an independent external verification or external review process. Now, when doing an external reflection or review process, you involve a lecturer or tutor or an independent expert that's not involved directly with your performance, so that they can be able to identify those issues that you could be causing you not to do well in that test and exam. A lecturer or tutor may be in a position to reaffirm the issues that you've identified in your internal analysis. And this is the most important tool when you have an external independent person corroborating the issues that you've picked up. You are then likely to feel confident that you've addressed adequately the issues that are causing you not to fail. Another important element of having an external party, such as a lecturer and a tutor, review and analyze your performance is that you are able to do a completeness check to identify that all issues that caused you to fail have been adequately addressed. This could happen, for example, that a lecturer or tutor identifies that part of the things that made you not do well in that test is that you were unable to apply principles correctly. Now, if you didn't pick this up in your internal reflection, you are then able to be made aware of this issue so that you are able to address it as part of your process to dealing with failure. The third step that you must do is then have a plan of action. A plan of action is directly linked to the issues you've picked up in step 2. That is, whatever plan you implement must directly address the issues that you've picked up. For example, if you've identified that making silly mistakes and time pressure is one of the issues that caused you to fail the test and exam, your plan will then have to directly address these issues. This could be done by instituting a process of performing tutorials and exam questions under exam conditions. And therefore, when you practice under exam conditions or in a venue that simulates the test and exam, it will then allow you to be able to simulate the pressure of being in the exam room so that you can be able to gain those tricks and tips to be able to address time pressures in a test and exam. This is important when doing a plan of action, that it should directly address the issues that you've picked up in step 2. The fourth element when in a position to be able to deal with failure is that you then need to track your progress. It's no good having a plan, but you don't have milestones or targets in place to assess how close you are to achieving those specific targets. A milestone or a process of tracking your progress allows you to be engaged to be able to assess whether your plan of action is effective. Now, there are various ways that you can go about tracking your progress. The one of which is instituting tests and exams post your dissection of the issues. When you perform these tutorials again under exam conditions, you're in a position to assess what are the issues that you had picked up and whether those issues have been adequately addressed now. So if you were performing at a level of 40% in those tests and exams, what you want to see is incremental change to 60 to 70%. Another way that you could ultimately track your progress is using an independent person to verify that you're on the right track. For example, you could submit a test and exam, a practice question every week, and by instituting that process, one sample test and exam could be submitted to your lecturer or your tutor, and they will be able to give you feedback and commentary for that specific learning area in that week. The comments will then be your way of gauging whether you're progressing in terms of implementing your plan of action. That's another aspect that you can then implement in ensuring that you become successful. Lastly, but certainly not least, you must learn from your mistakes. It's no good implementing a plan and having a progress being tracked and then repeating those mistakes. Wise individuals understand that every experience has a learning curve towards it, and once you've obtained the necessary learnings, you then have to implement those prospectively. This is the most important thing. When you've implemented a plan of action and it's working for you, you don't have to limit it to that issue only. You can use it in other areas or disciplines. For example, if time was an issue that resulted in you not performing optimally your tests and exams, and now you've realized by doing your tests and exams under exam pressure, you're in a better position to do well, you can then use those tools and tricks that you've picked up in other learning areas to avoid having to experience a similar fate and prevent yourself from experiencing failure before it happens. Another thing that you could do is that if, for example, in your plan of action, you identified that you didn't learn correctly or appropriately, you could implement the correct learning strategies from day one in order to avoid yourself experiencing that failure again. One of the key tools that we talk about, especially in a previous video on the 24-hour rule, is being able to address the learning process or the learning cycle adequately. This involves pre-reading, post-reading, doing your tests and exams under exam pressure, then ultimately understanding where you went wrong in your tests and exams, consulting, and then teaching others. By performing the learning cycle earlier on, you are able to identify issues before their materials. Another, again, key tool that you can use is building rapport with lecturers and tutors and allowing yourself to obtain that feedback well in advance before you actually write the test and exams. By building those relationships, again, you could submit tutorials, tests, and practice questions to them to have and look at. Once you receive those comments, you are then able to gauge, especially for the new learning areas that you're addressing, whether or not you're on the right path. By receiving that feedback prior to writing the exams, you are able to implement changes within your systems of learning so that you don't have to experience failure, and you are able to be in a position to understand what works and what doesn't prior to you actually writing that test and exam. Hopefully, now after understanding these 5 steps we've unpacked today, you are in a better position to cope and deal with failure. We hope to see you soon, and remember that failure is not fatal, and we know that it's your stepping stone to becoming successful. Until we meet again, thank you.